Our researchers tell me prevention is key, as the number of people that are unhoused is almost double the capacity of shelters or temporary housing. But thanks to multiple grants, they're now trying to help families before it even gets to that point.
Critical ratio here that really rings true is it's 19 to 10. So for every 19 households that become unhoused, currently we're only effectively able to rehouse 10 of them.
Professors of psychological science Laura Knoll and Robert Wickham have been researching the causes of homelessness for years, trying to find ways to prevent it.
But essentially, it comes down to more bills than an individual or household can pay.
So in April, NAU researchers created an organization, and with the help of $10 million of state and grant funding, they began giving $2,000 to about 5,000 households across Arizona. They will then study how these funds prevent people from becoming unhoused.
We're seeking to provide flex funds to households and individuals who are right on the precipice of becoming unhoused, for individuals to be able to, relieve those debts and avoid eviction.
But according to nationalhomelessness.org, people in rural communities often have less access to services like shelters. So researchers are also training people to work in rural shelters.
To solve real-world problems that these organizations are facing as they are becoming overwhelmed by the influx of individuals seeking services.
They say their hope is by understanding what causes people to become homeless, they can help prevent it to keep people in their homes.
As an attempt to prevent human suffering, right, and some of the most profound kind, is we want people to have healthier, more fulfilled lives that are free of terrible preventable events like this.
Researchers say the best way that the public can get involved is to find a local shelter and find some time to volunteer there.
Mason, you mentioned talk about training people to work in shelters, maybe in rural parts of Arizona. Do you know what that training looks like?
Absolutely. So researchers and local shelters here have told me it takes a specific person with specific training to work in shelters. So what researchers are doing is they're training NAU students to work with all kinds of people, whether they are homeless, they have disabilities, or have experienced domestic violence. So that's part of their training to help local shelters here in Flagstaff.
It's nice that they're arming them with some ways to give back to the community. Mason, thank you.